Welcome to a very interesting video where I go over a recent interview from Academy Games. Uwe was talking around Stellaris, which if you didn't know is over 800 days late. And he's kind of talking around online hate, people who are upset at games that are delayed, talking about how much money these games make, and a whole host of other things. And it's actually a great launching point to discuss, in general, why board game developers sometimes aren't thinking around backers, and backers aren't sometimes thinking around board game developers. And then the internet hate and all that. I mean, there's a lot to digest here and a lot of interesting points, and including like some financial stuff that we're going to get into. So it's very, very interesting. I hope you enjoy this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, this was an interview that G3 Boardroom had with Uwe. I'm going to go ahead and link to it down in the description below. Just know that I am not pushing for you guys to go in there and like bombard with a whole lot of negativity or anything like that. I'm not sure that's exactly what he's going for. It seems this is a general trend to want a little bit more of a happy time in your hobby space, which I can respect a ton. Not everybody likes all the negativity. In fact, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So it's going to be linked down below. You can watch the whole thing. There's a whole host of information, and overall, both of them have a lot of fun in this interview. I'm talking on just a specific point around Stellaris.
Everybody's waiting for Stellaris. Stellaris is a Paradox Interactive's one of the most popular, best 4X space game in the world. Incredible game. And Paradox Interactive gave us the honor to get the license to do the board game. Unfortunately, it is so involved. When it came out with the Kickstarter, we were so far along. But as the video game changed...
So this is interesting, as he talks around how the game, when it was on Kickstarter, the game that you guys backed, you guys being the backers of this game, it was already really far along. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say I believe him, even though if you watch my video coverage of it before, I wasn't so confident in that. But for the sake of argument, I'd say it was. Regardless, the game that was presented to you isn't always the game that you're going to get.
We need to make changes in the board game. And then we got writers from the original Paradox games joining in. They had all these great ideas.
Okay. So what he's saying here is essentially the term scope creep. They launch Kickstarter, they have an idea of a game, they're going to show, hey, this is Stellaris, Academy Games' version of this as a board game. And that's awesome and super cool, and a lot of people back it because they like the Stellaris, or they like the way the game looks or sounds or whatever, right? And then more stuff keeps happening. You see the game keeps changing, and so then the board game has to change. And now these writers show up, and they have these ideas. Well, let's implement all those ideas. And the moment you do that, you get the scope creep. And you see this all the time, right? Dimension Games did this with Dawn of Madness, where it's like, oh, suddenly we have all of this story, and it really exploded, and we put a whole lot in there. And it's a hard decision to make, because at one point, people want to back games that are a passion project, that are created through passion to be something great and fantastic, and not just churned out, like a business would normally. That being said, there is kind of this in-between where if you don't market it that way, then you're really just selling a product. In other words, a lot of the campaigns, I feel, don't match the intent the creators want, or even the backers necessarily want. Instead of just launching a game saying, hey, we have this idea to make the Stellaris game, and we're going to try and make it as the best Stellaris game ever, and even if that means delaying it, guess what? We'll delay it. So while we have a date here, don't necessarily trust that. We will make it to where it's fantastic. If you are on board with that, go ahead and click that back button. Is not how anybody launches a campaign. In fact, I don't even know if a campaign like that would necessarily fun to be interested to see. I'd love for a company or a group of people or a person making a game to actually launch a campaign like that so I could see if it did. If you've seen a campaign like that, do let me know, by the way. But I've yet to see one. And for the most part, it's, here's this product, here's how this product plays. You pay this amount and you get this product. It's very much transaction driven. It's very much a store. This is the date you're going to get it. This is how much it's going to be shipping. This is how much it costs you. This is your stretch pay options, right? Whatever it is. That is how it is. So I'm fine with a passion project. I totally am. I think it makes a ton of sense to do. And I love that crowdfunding could do that. This is not how these campaigns are launched. It's not how they're presented to the backer. So when the backer sees this is how the game plays, this is the game, this is how much it costs, and they click pledge for that game on this date, that's what they're going for. In other words, you can't have both. You can't sell it like it's a done deal and then say it's not a done deal. Right, that's the problem, and that's where that friction comes from between the developer and the backer. And I think a lot of it has to do with how we structure and word these campaigns. It sets the wrong intention from the get-go. You start on the wrong foot right off the bat, where you're in the different mindset, and then you kind of want to do this, and then they kind of want you to do that, and it just ends up being poor. So that's one thing. The other thing that he mentioned was hey, they keep making updates to the video game, so we need to update the board game. And this is inherently, I feel, a misunderstanding between what the media is. And this is something that I see a lot of these moving goalposts, right? Star Citizen's famous for this, where it's like, oh, there's always something else. And, hey, the technology got better, so now we can do this. And guess what? While we do that, the technology gets better, and then we can do this. And then, oh, look, the technology got better, and then we can do this, and now we can do that. And then if there's no set scope or no set hard cap, you'll just iterate forever. Now, in a video game where you can just push updates over the internet, totally fine to update that. You can set those. In a board game, you can't. You get that one release. This is a problem we see all the time with the 1.1s and 1.5s and 1.8s and 2.0s. And, then the Master Sword solution to the 2.5 or whatever, right? Where you make a board game and that's the board game. It's both a blessing and a curse, right? You can't update it. It's like that forever until a new version and a new reprint. But at the same time, it means nobody can take that version away from you, right? I've played video games. Tom Clancy's The Division was famous for this for me, where I enjoyed playing a game a certain way, and then they patch it out where you can't play a game that way. For me, it was having an SMG with a riot shield, and I really liked that gameplay because it was just a cool kind of like constantly slow-moving, shooting damage, but then they nerfed it to where you couldn't even, like I was able to solo, and now I wasn't able to solo anything. I literally couldn't play the game anymore the way I wanted to. And you can do that. You can break a game for somebody. You can't ever do that. If you like one version of Warhammer or the other, you can forever play that with your buddies as much as you want. That version of the board game on your shelf right now is that way forever. They can't break it. They can't fix it. It's one of the problems and one of the worries people have around apps and board games is that finite, this is the game. And so to think that, as this constantly evolving medium is constantly evolving, I need to constantly evolve this non-evolving medium, the board game. There's a problem with that too. Just straight up, there's an issue with that. But let's keep going.
So we're 2 years late on that now, and that's out of the 15,000 backers, we've got about 60 very unhappy people.
So it's interesting that Uwe here goes from, we're 2 years late, right? We are 2 years late on delivering this. So we're supposed to deliver in 2022, which means we took the money before even that. And now we're over 800 days past when we said we'd give them this game. And he goes from that to the 50 negative backers, right? I think a lot of this distilled is around, first of all, assuming that the minority niche group that comment is not representative of other people. And it's hard to judge that. You don't know, right? There are some people that just will always feel bad and never say anything. There are some people that just don't care, and it's only the people who care that comment. You could also view that as your core audience. In other words, people that were so passionate about it, they will still comment 2 years later around this game instead of just moving on, forgetting about it. Who the heck cares? So there's a whole host of things you can look at. You can look at it as your core group. You can look at it as a niche group representative of a whole, or you can look at it as a niche group separate from the whole. And for some instances, it's one or the other, maybe even all three, right? It just kind of depends. Either way, I don't necessarily follow the fact that if only 10 people are willing to speak up, then that means that there was only 10 people upset. I've been in enough life situations, especially in the workplace, where there's a whole bunch of people that are upset and just a couple guys willing to actually voice it. That's normally the case. That's my experience. Let me know yours. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But for me, that's a representative of a greater group. Now, is that greater group the majority? Who knows? For the most part, people focus on negativity and they will speak up on negativity over positivity, right? In other words, if the review would have been great, they don't even review it. But if the review is terrible, then they're going to review it, right? Happens all the time. Often you get a product, you love it, and you move on, you don't ever review it. Only it's negative when you review it, right? So I get that. So again, there's multiple sides to that, but either way, I don't necessarily conflate that. There's just 50 guys that are upset. Everybody else loves the fact that we're this late and working this long on it. I think the other casualness here is, we're just 2 years late. There is a fundamental breakdown amongst all backers and amongst all developers when it comes to what it means to back. You are giving up money for years now, years and years, without a product, right? Uva and that whole team there and every other creator has taken people's money and given nothing back, nothing. They have received 0 things back for their money that they invested into you, except your word, your promise. Hey, I'm getting you this game. It's going to be great. And now it's hey, it's going to be great. I'll get it to you eventually. And then it's, I'm going to get it to you later. And then, do you know what I'm saying? At some point, you feel a little disrespected. At some point, from a backer's perspective, they feel like, hey, I'm not getting anything in return. I gave you money and you've just walked off with it, right? Paid your mortgage with it, took your wife out to eat, put your kids through college, whatever it is, right? That dinner you just had, partly my money. You're welcome for that. Meanwhile, I have nothing except a smaller bank account. That's kind of what it is. And I feel like a lot of developers just don't realize the situation they're in compared to a store. Now, this is much different where, hey, this is a transaction, right? I made this. It's here for sale. You give me money. I send it back. There you go. You got something right away. It's a transaction. It's a here or there, right? Not a here and I'll wait, right? And they don't realize what that means. What the trust that means, the leap of faith that means, I trust you and I'm trusting what you say that means, that every backer does when they click that button. But that's really what it is. It's hey, you're giving me your word, Uva's word. This is what you're making, and this is when you're going to get it for me. This is what you're telling me. Now again, if the campaign was written in a different way, I understand, right? But right now it's here's the product, here's how much, here's how it plays, here's when I'm going to deliver it. Okay, there's your money. And then when you don't do that, when you decide otherwise, universally, as in I don't get a say-so, right? Which actually you do. There are laws in place where if you don't agree with the delay in a shipment of a product that you paid for, you can actually get a 100% full refund. I'll link down to that in the description below, by the way. Feel free to use this for any backer that does that, or any publisher that does this on crowdfunded board games, right? They can't just delay and not tell you when this is going to happen, right? That's not how anything works. And in fact, the law specifically states it doesn't even matter how you word it. It doesn't matter the spin you put as a company. It does not matter. If you don't agree to the delay, they have to give you your money back. Like, that's literally a law. So at least in the US it is. Again, Europe, I'm sure you guys have a bajillion more laws actually in place for that. You should definitely look it up. But at least for the US there is. Now, anyway, let's go on and keep going on this.
Which makes my life horrible because everywhere there's just negativity, spewing out, I got one last night.
Okay, so before we go any further than this, the negativity. It's interesting. I mentioned before how I felt like this channel doesn't really want a lot of negativity in the hobby. This channel is in the channel that had this interview. And I think that's just in general. A lot of people in the board game space don't want negativity. They don't like the negativity I bring when I critique the industry. There's people who don't like the negativity on a hard critique of a board game. So they want the softball critique, right? They want I wish it didn't have as many tokens, but it's great otherwise, right? All in all, right, of those kind of things. There's a very big tendency to just trend positive in our hobbies. At least in the board game hobby. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with just wanting positivity in your hobby space. Sometimes it just sucks to focus on all the negativity. I totally get that. And everybody's built differently around that as well, or wants different things out of their hobby or out of the industry. totally okay. If you want just, hey, I bought this game, please tell me how great it is in this review. There are channels there for you. There are sources there for you. If you just want to, hey, I just want to enjoy games. I don't even care what they're reviewed. I just love these board games. They're so awesome. There's a lot of opportunity there for you as well, right? No problem at all with that. But I think in general, there's a lot of people that are in this, even in the industry, as a business, no longer just a hobbyist, that still want that positivity only, that they don't want the negativity in there. It's an odd push against that from within the industry. Some of it is because they don't like the critical nature of it. But I've encountered a ton of developers that are almost aghast to any kind of like negative reaction to the product they make. Like they're almost flabbergasted. Like, oh my gosh, you have something negative to say about this board game or about my company or about how I'm running this company, and it's just so unheard of in the industry. It's definitely a growing niche where you're getting a little bit more critical nature towards the actual industry and the companies instead of just even the board games. But it's a very slow trend, and for the most part, there's a lot of people that have been in the industry for a while that are not used to the negativity. They don't handle the negativity well because they react new to it. I remember when I first started putting my face out there and making internet stuff, and suddenly now there are people listening to me and I'm putting myself out there. There was some negativity. There always is. And I didn't always react to it very well because you have to kind of grow used to being in the public light and being critiqued as somebody doing something and creating something. It definitely takes a while, and some people are just better at it than others. And so Uva and a lot of other publishers, I feel, are just now starting to learn how to necessarily react to that.
The guy said, oh, they haven't done any work on this since last fall, blah, blah, blah. And you know, you have to take in all this hate and all this negativity.
Right, especially after doing all that work, you know.
I have 5 full-time guys just working on that game.
Now that's wild to me. So 2 years, 5 full-time guys. Now I don't know how much he's paying these full-time guys, but hopefully like a minimum wage or more, right? 5 people, you know how much money that is? That is an insane amount of money to put into this. It kind of, again, reminds me a little bit of Star Citizen, where at some point, I feel you either, and I don't mean this necessarily for Academy Games, I mean this in general, right? You can either make a product or you can't. You either suck at project management or you don't, right? And I don't mean this, again, specific to Uva. I just mean in general. Again, I'm thinking Star Citizen a lot, too, where it's like you just need to define a game, deliver it, and then iterate on that, especially with the Star Citizen thing. That's a whole other story. But the point is that there are some people that are really good at business and really good at driving results and really good at like, okay, here's what we're doing, here's that, I have a vision, this is what we're creating, and this is what we're doing. And then you put milestones and you track and you have this Gantt chart, whatever it is. It doesn't matter, right? You iterate over it, you're doing some sprint stuff. I don't care. The point is that you have some sort of project management style that can manage the project. And then you have these projects that just go out of control, that just go out of scope, out of budget, just wild. They are not delivering, and in fact, they may never deliver. And if so, not in a very good way, because it's not structured, it's not managed, right? So anybody that tells me that they have 5 full-time people for 2 years and can't make a board game that they said they were already far along with, that already have the support from the IP, to me, that's crazy. You got to control your project a little bit. It sounds to me like you got a problem with this, right? And that's how I react to that. To me, that's not reassuring. That's concerning. 5 full-time people? Like, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars are you pumping into this? Again, assuming it's 5 full-time people, assuming there's not any like fibbing around this, but he's going to get into how much he's making on this still too. Maybe it's coming out, maybe it's not. I still don't think it is, but it is kind of odd. It seems like a money sink to me, though.
Full-time, salaried, every month. I don't wait 2 years because I make money off that.
They're working at.
Okay, so interesting here. He says, I don't wait 2 years because I'm making money off. In other words, he's saying this is actually costing the company. This is dragging down the company right now. Which again, you should probably get something out, I feel. And then again, just come out with a 1.5 and have people, get the pack that updates things and adds new features. I think it sounds like a great win for your company. As long as you keep the IP, you deliver the base game, you iterate, oh, there's this new expansion that adds this new feature in the video game that you could just, it's like printing money. That sounds like an awesome win to me.
They're working at it. It's coming.
So, and it's like that negative is just so. I had another one that said, a guy from Poland. I just hope I just am praying that you die and go to hell. And
Okay, now right there, like that is just ridiculous. Nobody should be talking like that to anybody else, like ever, in person, on the internet, anything like that. That's sort of over the line, just socially awkward, unneeded, hateful, spiteful comments. One way or the other is not needed. It kills your whole purpose, right? Depending on how you communicate, depends on how you're heard, right? I learned this the hard way because I would communicate in a way to where nobody would hear what I'm saying. The message, the point, the intent got lost because of the language used. This is the same kind of thing. If you're upset, if you're trying to get to someone and be like, hey, I'm trying to get you to realize how unhappy I am that you took my money and didn't give me anything and keep telling me falsities around the date or the timeline or anything like that, right? Like, that is terrible. But you can express it in a way to where they listen. Instead, you get this reaction like, why would you say that? Once you cross that line, it's like everything you said doesn't matter anymore. I don't ever condone this. This is such a stupid thing for somebody to do. It's just terrible. Like, what kind? There are people on the internet that are just silly. Now, do I think it's serious? No, I don't think it's necessarily serious. But people, when they get on the internet, they like spin this like hate cycle, and suddenly things that aren't very important seem very important. Right? It's like the Twitter effect where it can consume people's lives and they focus on it and they obsess over it and they talk about it constantly instead of like going outside and touching grass, I think is how one of the other publishers recently described it. There's a good point there in the fact that like sometimes I think you need to detach a little bit. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter, but it does put things into perspective enough to where you're not talking like that, because that's ridiculous.
So I can't tell them what's going behind the lines, that certain video game rules are changing. So we're implementing into the game, which takes more time.
Sure.
And so
you'd have more people complaining about a bad game that comes out. It's better to do it right.
that's why I say, how many people you buy Kickstarter, beautiful miniatures, you play once, go,
Right, yeah.
Where's the hate? Well, they came out in time because it's
Okay. So, the games, the meh games. This is actually fascinating because I think Uwe here is proving a point that he's not trying to prove. But I think it's interesting that everybody notes that. He notes it, I note it, like everybody notes this, right? If you make a game and you deliver it and it's that's a lot of Kickstarters, let's be honest, right? A lot of these crowdfunded board games, a lot of them can be You move on. Again, you rate it low on BGG and you move on. You give it a 5 or a 6 or a 4 or whatever, right? And then you're done with it and you move on. But you're not angry, you're not upset. And I think the reason is, and that's what he's saying, is like people would get more upset if they delivered a game and it was No, that's not true at all. In fact, that's what he just said, is like, no, if you just delivered a game and it was I backed a game, you told me this is how it was, you told me this is when it was delivered, you deliver it, it's but whatever, you did what you said you were going to do. The problem is the not delivering. That's what people care about more. People care more about you keeping your word on delivering something that I paid for than whether or not that thing is even any good. I think that's a powerful message to how important it is to deliver on what you said you're going to deliver. It's fascinating to see that, actually. And the fact that it's pointed out here, again, in a misconstrued way, I feel, that the delivery matters. Delivering the game matters more than if it's even any good. Now, granted, we all say, hey, I'm willing to wait a little bit for a great game. Are you willing to wait 2 years? Maybe you are, maybe I'm not. We're two backers, so how do you decide? Ultimately, you just got to follow up and deliver what you're doing, or launch the campaign in a way to where everybody's on board for a delay. But that's not how anybody is, right? It's always delivered and to you in a way that's like, oh, this is a thing. This is how it plays. This is what you're going to do. So it's again, fascinating to me that the delivery is what's important more than even the quality, especially because you can iterate on it. You can improve things, right? There is a way to do that with crowdfunding, actually, that would make it impossible at a retail wise, right? That's one of the great things about it. So anyway, just interesting that you point that out, that, people go, we're trying to make a great game. I get it. And I think that's awesome. But that's not the type of campaign that was launched. It's not the type of campaign that was backed. and so backers weren't signing up for that, and that's kind of, I think, the problem there.
It's incredible, the game. The people we were play testing at, gathering of friends and all, it's coming out. We're looking for August, maybe September release.
Doesn't look like it's going to be August, I'm assuming.
Because we got to get it done for Gen Con, you know, I'm pushing it.
Yeah.
But that's a huge game. It's like over 3-point-some million.
So when he says this is a huge game, now he's talking about financials, right? So he goes from like, hey, it's a great game and it's a huge game, not because, oh, it's expansive or you can do so much in it. It's made 3.5 million, right? And then he goes on farther.
We're still getting $10,000 a week in new backers.
$10,000 a week in new backers. Now, obviously, that's there's no data behind that number. That's Zuva talking in a very casual interview, which is totally fine. I'm not like holding him to that number, like it's whatever, right? But either way, it's obviously continuing to make money from new backers. Now, this is an interesting thing because any new backers obviously are having to wait a lot less, so they're getting a much better deal out of it than people who backed during the Kickstarter. Which is kind of an interesting thing. It shows how these companies often use long pledge managers these days. They are really... Do you remember when a pledge manager would just open, close, be done, and they would make it? I think the last one I saw that did that was Townsfolk Tussle. And that was weird even then because it had been a while. So if you go even farther back than that, God knows how far you have to go. Nowadays, it's we were just talking on my Discord with some patrons around Awaken Realms and how they'll deliver multiple prototypes out and then open the pledge manager multiple times to be able to get more people to come in and pay off different things. And they keep adding more stretch goals. It's like the campaign never ends and there's always a way to give them money. So while they've delayed 800 days plus, you can still pay them money for this board game that's now way late. It's kind of an interesting aspect there. Now, that being said, if there's 5 salary guys on this, 10,000 a month is not, or 10,000 a week, probably still not making any money there. That's still probably a negative, but there's definitely money still coming in, which is kind of interesting. And it's also interesting that it instantly goes to the financial success of it and not necessarily the creative success of making and delivering a board game. Instead, it's constantly making a board game, not delivering a board game, and getting money while you do it, which isn't exactly a great focus. And I have some summary here in a moment, too. But
so the 50 haters, you know, come to me and face-to-face tell me, instead of online, just tracking and following us and other publishers.
Okay, so that's it. That's the end of the interview here of the section that I'm posting about anyway. I think it's interesting that it goes straight from, here's how much money I'm making every week on this, on new people. By the way, those 50, like, why is the 50 haters attached to how much money he's making at the time, making on this board game? It's kind of an interesting look at what is successful. What is success to these companies? These companies being some companies in the industry, right? And for a lot of them, and again, this is why I think it's a disconnect between backers and publishers. When you're running a business, obviously you want the business to be successful, but you start thinking around the business issues and the business successes and how to get from one thing to another. I've been part of companies where you get so wrapped up in the internal business problems, you lose sight of the actual thing. Right, I've literally done that. There was an instance I remember, and it just stood out to me so clearly. There was an issue delivering a product at a previous company I worked with, and so they were going through some tests and doing some things. And I'm a software developer, so we were essentially using like simulators and emulators to like test on this product we're eventually going to deliver. And we're talking around fixes and stuff around this. And we were in this meeting for almost an hour. And everybody was talking about these simulators and emulators and the issues with it and how we're doing this and how we can fix that and all that. And I stopped and I was like, guys, we're not selling a simulator. We're not selling an emulator. We're selling a device, an actual like unit that people buy. Does it work on that? Right? Because you lose focus on that because you're in the weeds, right? You're in the trenches, your head's down, you're working on that. You're just focused on that. And you almost have like these horse blinders on where like I'm just focused on, running my business as great as possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think any of that's malicious, but it loses focus of the big picture, right? That's where good project management comes in, right? Where you could see high level, hey, here's fundamentally what the company needs to be doing. Here's fundamentally where we're at. Fundamentally, here's where our customers are. Here's where our backers are. Here's what they want. Here's what they need. Here's how we can do that better. And if you don't take that step back and self-reflect and look at like the landscape of things, you're going to get that tunnel vision. You're going to get that vision on just, oh, I'm making $10,000 a week, therefore I'm a success. And it loses all nuance. It loses all of the meta around what that success is. And it loses, I think, the true success value here, right? He's talking about longevity. And now I'm busy talking around how this is hurting the company's public image long term. And it's like, well, which is it, right? If it's, oh, well, we're getting new people that don't care about that. Well, how many new people can you keep going through before you get through the whole market? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not an infinite growth thing at all. Instead, you got to foster a great public image and a great company making great products and sticking to great timelines and making great games in a successful and profitable way. Being unprofitable in this doesn't actually make me want to back your next campaign. If you're saying, hey, look, I'm losing a lot of money on this, developing for so long. Yeah, I'm making $10,000 a week, but in the same interview, I'm also talking about how I'm not delaying it because I'm making money, because it's not. I have 5 salary people working on this full time. You know, it just... I think publishers lose sight of what's important, of the circumstance that they're in, of the success that they can have moving forward, not just in this campaign, but in the next one. I think there's a fundamental churn that companies get to where they're not realizing what they can actually do. Like I said, this is a great opportunity to deliver a great Stellaris campaign that people backed. You run the risk of changing it so much people don't like it. If they liked the original one better, there's going to be backers that backed not for Stellaris, but for the gameplay and don't care about the IP at all. So if you are changing that gameplay to match the new IP, they're not going to be on board with that. They backed this one, not that one, right? So like it's important to deliver that, and then again you can keep making campaigns. I just covered Teneris Ultimate. They made $2.8 million, and that was like the third one it had done. It was just adding a few more SKUs. Otherwise, it's all reprint, i.e., profit. If you get a good IP and you can deliver a great game that you can iterate on as a board game developer, as a board game creator, not just a campaign maker and a development churn studio, you can do great things. And I think a lot of companies can as well. I think we're viewing this IP wrong, right? As in, this is our one shot to do it. We don't want to make an game for sure, but you definitely want to make one that pleases people from a whole campaign perspective, not just from the board game, because it's a different situation. You're working off of loans, right? You're working off the goodwill, and that goodwill can deteriorate. And I've seen it to where it can ruin a company that otherwise makes great games. I feel Mythic Games fits that quite well. Mythic Games made great games. I loved Solomon Kane, right? I loved Mythic Battles. I loved all these things that Mythic Games made. Darkest Dungeon, great game. Six Siege, I loved that game. But that doesn't mean that they were a good development studio, and then their goodwill was eroded, and now they'll never be able to make a board game again. And I see so many companies doing this, and it's hurting the entire industry. At the same time, as backers, we need to be able to communicate to where it breaks through this barrier, breaks through this, I have this view set, you have this view set, and we're not seeing eye to eye. And death threats aren't it, wishing death on people's not it, being obtuse isn't it, being rude isn't even necessarily it. There's certainly room for firm communication, but at the same time, you got to actually communicate, and you got to actually work on seeing where they're at, seeing what their viewpoint is. I can understand wanting to make a great game, and I think you should maybe make a campaign that allows you the opportunity to do that instead of making too many promises with hard dates, hard numbers, and hard timelines. Anyway, that's it. That's all I had today. I think it was an interesting look at just the industry as a whole, what the focus is, what the viewpoint is. If you have any thoughts on this at all, do let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts. And Uwe has reached out, by the way, and communicated his intent. And his intent is not to, egg on people, but just to say, hey, come talk to me, and I'll tell you how passionate about this I am and how much I care about this. And all that kind of stuff. And I think that's great. Again, I don't think any of this is malicious from either side, per se. I think people just get wrapped up in what they're doing, whether it's tracking a game that didn't deliver or whether it's making a game that hasn't delivered. Either way, you're just wrapped up almost in the same thing in parallel. It's like there's like a one-way mirror on each side, and so you just can't quite communicate. Kind of interesting. Anyway, have a great rest of your day, guys. Take care. Bye, guys.